Welcome, my friends. Welcome to the Inspiring You Show. If we haven't met, I'm Henry. All right, y'all. So, I want to talk about something that I have been putting out there on Inspiring You Patreon, specifically in the All Access tier. I just released the final part of the 3-part Harmonic Abundance Crystalline Dowsing series, and I'm ready to talk about it to everyone. So, this is a deep body of work on clearing scarcity, bringing in the ability to receive, activating prosperity, and the energetic architecture that shapes how support is actually experienced, allowed, and held in life. So, this is not a simple abundance course focused only on mindset, positive thinking, or manifestation techniques. Y'all, this is deep. It is much, much deeper exploration into the layers that often sit underneath abundance struggles, including scarcity patterning, inherited and collective conditioning, nervous system bracing around receiving, guilt, pressure, or fear connected to support, or even like overgiving and under receiving patterns. Could also be visibility and worth distortions, energetic containment, the soul human interface, as well as like prosperity pathways and timeline anchors. So, this series was created for those who sense that the issue is not only about wanting more, thinking differently, or trying to manifest harder. It is for those who can feel that there's a deeper issue and maybe in what the body has learned, what the nervous system expects, what the field is still carrying, and what receiving money, visibility, support, and prosperity has been associated with over time. So this series unfolds in 3 parts. Part one is the repatterning the soul human's relationship to receiving. So, this part works with scarcity, encoding, reversal patterns, inherited lack structures, and the deeper field level distortions that can make receiving visibility, support, and prosperity feel unsafe, or even maybe there's some guilt or inconsistent or even out of reach. And then part two is repairing the infrastructure of receiving. Yes, y'all, you might need to repair that infrastructure of receiving. So, this part moves into the inner architecture that allows support to land, to stay, and nourish. It includes nervous system recalibration, self value restoration, energetic containment, and deeper work with the soul human interface. And then part three is activating harmonic prosperity codes and timeline anchors. So, this last part works with the activating the aligned prosperity pathways, coherent opportunity, right timing, right exchange, and the deeper timeline structures through which prosperity can begin to stabilize more fully in lived reality. So, together, these 3 parts form a deeper, layered body of work for those who really want to understand abundance, receiving, prosperity at a much deeper level than maybe some of the manifestation language or some of the other classes maybe you've taken. So, for me, the relationship with abundance has been one of the deeper questions of my life. In many ways, I feel like I'm an investigator, part researcher, part engineer, an energy scientist, if you will, in some ways, testing what truly moves the needle. Y'all, I have like tried every angle, mindset work, intention setting, manifestation courses, and so many other courses. Anybody else? Anybody else tried a lot of courses along with hours of meditation, a ton of energy healing meditations, endless books, and a ton of sessions with all kinds of practitioners. And I will say, sure, some of these things did help certainly and in certain ways. Yet some of it just wasn't lasting. It wasn't fully embodied to last. And so eventually, like I would notice stubborn patterns would resurface. And so the question I kept coming back to was, how do you really transform your relationship with abundance? How do you really transform your relationship with abundance? That question has like stayed with me. And by the way, I have been doing this I started noticing things as I was a kid, but really in my 20s, I started doing a lot of this work and utilizing affirmations that certainly did help me in terms of retraining the brain. But like I said, how do you really transform your relation with abundance? And so I kept feeling like a lot of the abundance work and sometimes the way it has often been portrayed was missing deeper layers. So, it would be good for a good like sweeping, but it wasn't really getting those deeper layers in terms of a really deep cleaning. And so some of the common tools helped in certain ways. But I kept finding that deeper blocks that were more complex than how abundance is usually presented in some of the courses that I had taken or just some of the other work that I had done. And then for me, I then would go and workshop with the guides. I can't tell you how many sessions I've done with my guides on this topic, asking questions. And last year, I just got to the point where I was like, oh my goodness, I'm tired of talking about the same problem. Come on, let's get to the nitty gritty. Let's really workshop how this can be resolved. And then what I was shown was so much more than I even would have been ready to understand years before. So I understood why it was going in layers. And it was really unexpected and was definitely not in any kind of manifestation course I had taken. And so then it had me doing a ton of dowsing sessions with the guides last summer and into September and October of 2025. And with that then, you know, I was really learning even more so about clearing, recalibration, and so many other things. In these dowsing sessions, I would be learning and clearing, recalibrating, and y'all, it was intense at times. It was intense at times at how much was coming through in terms of understanding, clearing blocks to abundance, prosperity, financial flow, et cetera, et cetera. Yet I could feel things shifting. And in terms of that, also just increasing the consciousness of like really understanding. And with the shifting, even if it was small changes happening, I could feel things shifting than the previous years. And I just want to also say that when I think about abundance, I'm not thinking only about money. I'm thinking about the whole picture. Money, yes, but also joy, peace, groundedness, alignment, well-being, the ability to actually live with what is present in a healthy and coherent way. And with this, then I'll just say, in my over the years, over time, I just really started thinking and realizing the issue was not only about thinking differently or wanting more, it also had to do with what the body had learned about receiving, what the nervous system expected, and what the field was still carrying, and what support, money, visibility, prosperity had been associated with it over time. And so over the course of, the years, the guides have guided me to take various courses. One has been, taking trauma informed courses and then also taking a ton of energy, you know, energy modality certifications along with other certifications as well. And so all these different modalities ended up coming into play when the guides kind of brought me through last summer, the clearings and the recalibrations, because I had already gone through a level of understanding on things. And so then the next level of understanding they brought in, it was much easier to be able to digest the capacity of the consciousness they were bringing through. And so with it, then I just really realized even more so. One of the courses I took was with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score, the book that he wrote. And it was a, I think it was like a 6 or 7 month program. And so when the guides brought through about what the nervous system expected, I had a whole understanding, and then they brought in even more understanding on it for me. And it was just, I mean, it was like eye opening in terms of me understanding the caliber of what could possibly be happening in the human experience in relationship to abundance. And so with this though, I'll say though, along with it, of what can be associated with over time, it's not just, the nervous system, it's also what the field is still carrying. What support, money, visibility, prosperity has been associated with it over time. And that's not just your individual field. It's also possibly the ancestral field. It's also, could be past lives that could be affecting. And it could also be collective field. You're multidimensional, and so there was a lot of different information that was brought forward. But I'll also say, though, as I started realizing all of this, over the years, I also saw that it wasn't just me. What I was seeing wasn't just me. What I saw in myself was also mirroring in friends. I also saw it in, coworkers. I saw it in podcasts, social media. And then later in life, when I was doing work, because I worked in television for many years. And then later in life, when I was working with clients, I just saw similar patterns there. And what was so interesting to me, because then the next question is, how can all these people from different walks of life from around the world have such similar patterns? And yes, mindset matters. Yes, intentions, matter. Yes, manifestation practices can help. But in my own life, in my friends' lives, and just seeing in the outer world, and then also later in my work with my clients, I kept seeing deeper patterns that were not being fully addressed. Patterns connected to the body, the nervous system, receiving, overgiving, worth, visibility, and what support had been associated with over time. And it wasn't just then present life. I saw it in past lives and also maternal paternal lineages, how that is affecting in present life. And so it was it's just been so it's been so eye-opening in so many ways. And then even more when I started noticing these patterns years ago when I was working in television, but even more so than when I started doing, energy work. And then when I started doing past life energy clearings and recalibrations, I started seeing the patterns from past lives into present life, how something in a past life could be affecting this present life. And then I also started seeing, from the ancestral field, what could possibly be affecting the individual field. If something happened in the maternal lineage, how that may have gone unprocessed and then is now affecting this present life. And maybe that person is supposed to support in terms of clearing and completing some aspect for the lineage work, or how the collective field could be affecting the individual field. And within that, then it's not just the collective, there also could be within the country you live in, what could possibly be affecting your individual field. And then also, there's also things like in terms of the planetary aspects where that could be affecting your field and your relationship to Earth, too. What is your relationship to Earth? And with that, there are other questions that came in that I didn't even know before last year that, oh, this is something to ask about. Where when did your soul actually come in terms of, for your human in this lifetime? And I think sometimes we may think that, the time you were born, the year you were born, that's when your soul came in. But souls can actually, from what I understand now, souls can actually come in years and years before, sometimes like decades before, to actually seed, to then support when your human is actually born. And so when your soul actually came in regard to earth, that could actually have an effect on your prosperity and abundance. And so like if your soul came in like the 1950s and earth is still reading, your field from the 1950s, that's going to have an effect on you in 2026, especially if, you know, depending on if you were born, born as like a woman in terms of how the 50s associated that relationship. And there's other things too, like I'm just giving that as an example. There's other things that how a decade was happening may or may not have like some influence in your present day field that then is supporting you in terms of your soul human interface to possibly recognize, understand, process, and then come to completion to clear and shift and recalibrate. It may not just be for you, might also be then for your ancestors who were, in that time, or also could be in terms of the greater aspect of the world and earth, because earth might have some clearing in that as well. And you may then hold a piece of that puzzle in regard to this. Like there's so many incredible, like I get really excited talking about because I'm like, there's so many amazing like pathways to like think about. So this just really opened up my eyes to understanding abundance from a whole nother space in terms of expanded consciousness. And then with this, I'll say though, you know, some tools have really helped me along the way. And yet, but for me, I just kept having the same stubborn blocks kept surfacing. And then when I saw that in myself, my friends, later in clients, that just was always it was always bigger than think better thoughts and attract more money. And I'm not saying though you don't need to retrain the brain in terms of neural pathways and also letting yourself change language and how you're telling and how the story is being shared because there's a ton of research on this in regard to story narrative and how you might be sharing and things like that. So I'm not saying that because I do use affirmations to support me in terms of retraining the brain. And I do use various techniques that help, especially if I feel like I'm stuck, like I'm looping in something. I will go on a walk and do like a 10-minute affirmation walk to help me clear and shift and retrain the brain and support in terms of going into new neural pathways. But I will say though, like it all became clear to me that this work of abundance, it's even more expanded and we needed to go even further. We needed to go further beneath the surface, that we were just tapping lightly on the surface, that we needed to delve deep underneath. And so it also became clear to me, y'all, we need to let go of some of the marketing, the magical thinking, the buy my class and this will change your life propaganda, or the idea that you do one 21-day abundance practice and course and suddenly everything's going to resolve. It's like, yes and no. Maybe some things will, but the thing is, we are multidimensional and every day is a new possibility. Something may work for a bit, yet having consistent tools to check in is probably one of the best gifts you can give your human. And that's also part of why I started really learning the art of dowsing energy work. To me, dowsing has been one of the most transformational tools in my life and continues to support me in ways that I had no idea was available. And I'm not going to say though maybe dowsing isn't the right fit for you, but for me as a modality, it is 100% supported me in tangible ways that I've seen the effects in my own life, my families, my friends, as well as, my clients I work with. And I did dowsing for myself for years and years. And it has been like to me just the gift that keeps on, helping me and just gift that keeps on giving. I also just want to talk a little bit about, I worked in television for over 20 years and I just want to talk about some of the things I saw in terms of, wealth and things like that. So I worked in television for over 20 years and I met a lot of people whose bank accounts were huge, like multimillionaires. Some of them are in the billionaire club now. Yet their inner lives and just their outer lives in some ways seemed chronically overdrawn. They seemed anxious and they seemed at times deeply joyless. Like no joy, just all stress and exhaustion and really disconnected, like really disconnected. And just, but it really was the no joy and the no peace and not seeming like just happy with anything in their lives, like really like a deep sense of just misery, like really, really miserable in their lives. And it was so, I was like, what? You have all this money you possibly could need, yet you're so deeply unhappy, so miserable. And just in it, and no matter how much they had, it just didn't ever seem like it was enough. Like they're constantly grasping for more and more and more, trying to fill something that was so empty within them. And it was so incredibly sad for me to see that you have everything in the world, but you don't seem to really have anything in the world because you are so incredibly unhappy, ungrounded, unaligned, disconnected, and in this real grasping of trying to get more and more and more to feed that inner hunger that is just constantly in starvation, that leads you into these major greed cycles of taking, and just being so unhappy. And then at the same time, when I was working in TV, I also met a lot of people with very modest means who radiated grounded peace and felt really satisfied with the life they were living. I mean, I worked in reality TV, and so I learned so much from traveling and doing these shows and meeting people from all different walks of life. And it was so interesting to me how people who had such modest means at times were, to me, so much wealthier than the people who had physical wealth. And so clearly, like wealth in one column doesn't guarantee abundance across the board. And the gift from me for working in reality TV taught me this and so much more and showed me through just people that I met. And so, meeting people whose net worth numbers are sky high, yet their inner lives were so compressed. There's so much constriction. And often I just noticed like poverty mindset with heavy negative energy, which to me is so interesting too. Which part of the course, I did ask the guides how people can be really physically wealthy, but essentially have poverty mindset. And the guides did answer it. It's really interesting. And so, and then how to like people who are really, I noticed people that I worked with at times that were very wealthy, they had so many anxious thoughts, strained relationships, no real sense of purpose, like no real sense of purpose other than, needing more and more and more to try to fill some emptiness. So you have a ton of money, big homes, yet just emptiness in your life. And the wealth they accumulated, they were in such fear of losing it, which created that grasping that they needed more and more and more and more and more. And so the greed was high, and therefore it drove them to overwork and to be constantly stressed and not really even seemingly like they're enjoying the life of opulence that they have the opportunity to do. And then at the same time, I met people with such modest means who just had such a deep reserve of peace, creativity, grounded joy. And they also They had the capacity to share, welcome you in. They would say like, I may not have much, but would you like X, Y, and Z? They would offer, and by the way, their X, Y, and Z oftentimes would be these incredible, like, I don't know, homemade, you know, maybe a homemade meal or um something something, and they just had so much warmth and generosity, and it just, even if they were offering you, do you want a glass of water, it just would feel and taste different because they had such warmth and generosity and so excited to be able to connect with you, and they're enjoying the present moment of being there with you. And so it just felt different. It felt really wealthy, abundant. And so the contrast to me showed something crucial. Money is a single expression of abundance, not the definition of it. And if the nervous system is locked in fight or flight, or the field is tangled with guilt, scarcity, greed, fear of losing what you have, or overgiving, adding more cash won't fill the deeper deficit. No matter how much money you have, if you feel in lack and empty, you will keep trying to accumulate to make the hole you feel go away, but it won't until you address it. Because the other thing I saw in regard to, um, working when I was working in reality TV, sometimes too, people would get into a space where no matter how much money they brought in, that it would never stay in their field long. And it was almost like they had holes, and the money would just be like coming in, fast and large, but then disappearing just as fast. So there's essentially some sort of, hole in your relationship to abundance or prosperity or financial flow of money, some sort of lack aspect where you're not able to hold on to it because there's something in there that has to be addressed. And so, true for me, I started looking at true abundance is really a multi account ecosystem: resources, vitality, peace, purpose, financial flow, prosperity, abundance, and a healthy relationship to receiving and giving, balanced and funded across all layers. So abundance to me is that ecosystem. It's not just money, it's joy, peace, groundedness, alignment. And I started seeing and noticing that if the deeper architecture is tangled, adding cash doesn't guarantee joy, peace, purpose, groundedness, and alignment. And it also doesn't mean that in the future, you're going to have that cash. It might go out just as fast as it comes in. And it also does not mean that if your deeper architecture is tangled, adding cash doesn't also mean it's going to give you real satisfaction with the life you are living. So once I saw that, the question became, because again, like I mentioned, I'm kind of like a researcher here, like what's really going on here? What's happening? And I'm in that curiosity mode, asking the questions, right back into the research lab, asking the questions. So then the question became, what invisible architecture determines whether new money actually lands as felt prosperity or just amplifies old patterns? That's right. It can amplify old patterns. What? And so then that question is what drove me past the fix your mindset formulas and into the deeper work I do now in terms of mapping the body's memory of receiving, recalibrating the nervous system, clearing inherited scarcity codes, restoring the inner structures that let support in all forms actually stay, nourish, and multiply. But again, I'm not saying that not to utilize affirmations or intention work, because I feel like they are an important part of this, and that it is something that you can support in terms of shifting from a scarcity mindset into allowing yourself to shift into an abundant mindset. Because when we get into a fixed mindset, it doesn't allow us then to have that open curiosity in terms of your mind to allow you to then call in. So it is important. It is not just all of it though. And then I also just want to say in regard to like 5D states, which Y'all, you can meditate and you can be in an incredible, vivid 5D or quantum field, and you can feel clear, expanded, timeless, limitless, and also then still walk back into a life where bills, relationships, and nervous system reflexes pull you right into the old scarcity groove. Energetic altitude doesn't automatically translate into embodied reality. The bridge has to be built. We are light in physical form. We are a body within a body. We are in Earth's body. And so if Earth has an understanding of, is reading your field from like a 1950s lens and you're living in 1920, you're living in 2026, it does not matter how many meditations you do where you're in the 5D. It doesn't matter how much you're saying you're living in the 5D. It does not really mean that you're actually translating the physical aspect of 5D. So that's why you have to be in the curiosity mode of like what's really going on and become an investigator in relationship to your life of like what's happening here. And to me, like I find the work really enjoyable because it's like so interesting, like what's really going on here. And then I don't know, you find information that you would not even like believe at first. You're like, what? What? And then when you start working with it, and you're like, "Oh, I can feel that knowingness. I can feel that light truth." And you're like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense now. That makes sense." And your ability to learn, grow, and evolve and then expand the consciousness. Like it's just, I don't know, to me it's like so exciting in terms of the capacity of the work that you can do. And so but I will say though, doing the energy healing meditations can really support you. And also, though, you have to learn to work with the material and start becoming grounded and embodied with it. And that's where I feel like dowsing can really support you. And if you're in the Inspiring You Patreon, we've been doing these 5-part meditations and meditate with me that also really supports embodiment and the tool usage as well. And then along with the dowsing can just go a lot deeper. And then I also just want to say, part of this, like the work coming through and just kind of coming together, really happened because of last year for me, the wave of becoming. And I've talked about it quite a bit, especially if you're in the Inspiring You Patreon. There's been a ton of posts on it. Last year, the multi-dimensional wave of becoming came through. And I'll just say, wowzers, that for me, I went into an intense time of clearing, recalibration work in the dowsing more than I have ever been before. And I even got called to step away from social media in May for a while. And I entered months and months of intense dowsing, clearing, recalibration. And I was doing a lot of clearing non beneficial aspects of survival, strengthening, being able to shift into thriving, which is also lending to the work here in terms of the abundance course that I'm talking about. That was all part of it. And a lot of the questions that I've had for many, many years, some of them since I was a child, started getting answered. And then by October, things started like shifting in like a grander way. And then November, pieces really clicked in even more so. And then by December, this first part of the class of the new body of work began arriving fully formed and with some of the questions I had been asking for years. And I'll just say like, you know, I had questions for years, but I didn't know at some point if they were ever really gonna be answered. And I just kept asking, and then I would note when something shifted, recalibrated, but some of these bigger questions, I honestly didn't really I just didn't really know. And yeah, and so I then when this 3-part harmonic abundance crystalline dowsing course came through in December, I was like, "Oh, okay." And the guides were like, "Yep, we're gonna do a 3-part harmonic abundance crystalline dowsing course." And I was like, "Okay." And I thought it was gonna be, and this is where I love the human. I thought like, "Okay, we're gonna do the first one." And so the part 1 was released in the All Access Patreon in December 2025. I thought like all 3 of them were gonna be released in December, like, it was just gonna be consecutively, like, 1, 2, 3. Y'all, not so. And part of it was because the information that had to come through, there were so many elements to it. And when part 2 came through, it was released January 25th, 2026 in the all access Inspiring You Patreon. And that had to come through into the new year because in the new year, in regard to the work that we've been doing with the Way of Becoming was light format year 1 and 2026 is light format year 2. And so we had to be into January for the second part to have come through, along with some other information that needed to come through about it as well. And then now part 3, and I thought, okay, January 25th, 2026, part 3, probably, soon after. Not so. Part 3 was just released March 17th, 2026. And a big part of it is just the amount part 3 is so much deeper than I imagined. It's more than 100 pages in part 3 alone. And it dives into activating harmonic prosperity codes and timeline anchors, but it's more than that. It's explaining how you can have codes within you, and these are like light codes within you, but that doesn't mean that one, they're activated, or two, that they're actually being able to be embodied and live reality. And so there's different aspects that might have to clear to support that. And that goes along with then you could be doing energy meditations or, asking for downloads, upgrades, codes, etc. But that doesn't mean that the light switch for the code is actually on. You might feel a slight shift, but it does not mean that the actual code is working and it's on. And so part 3 really dives into it dives into so much. I mean, y'all, it was basically I wrote like a book and it took me 60 plus hours. It was so much. I mean, it was interesting, but it was a lot of work. And but with it though, like each part, it just went deeper than I expected. And really by the time part 3 came through, just it just brought everything together in a way that honestly, like I'm still surprised about. I'm like, what? I'm like so surprised about it. And I don't know, I think that's one of the best parts of humaning. Like, just and I'm not gonna pretend to be like, I downloaded it and like, oh, y'all, I'm still surprised. Like, I don't know, it's just remarkable. And I'm also gonna say, what it's just remarkable. Humaning is just this ever adventure journey that we're on. So yeah, so what started out like for me as a series of like these questions and then working with the guides on doing clearings and recalibration, not really knowing where it's really going to lead or what's going to really happen. I just was in the presence of like, okay, this is the work that's being called for. And I've had intentions, for years, not even knowing like this hasn't really even manifested. Is it still one that I should be putting on there? And I would get yes. Okay, I'll put it on there. And just really trusting in terms of where we are. So yeah, so what started out as a series of abundance really became a much more in-depth body of work in regard to scarcity, receiving, nervous system regulation, energetic containment, prosperity pathways, and aligned timeline anchors. So and I'll also say, like, if you do not douse and you join the Inspiring You Patreon, the All Access, there's also a beginner guide to dowsing available there in the All Access. It's there to support for learning the foundational practices. And that too can be super beneficial to learn. And I'll just say learning energy work has been deeply transformational in my own life, the lives of others. And for me, it's just really strengthened my connection to my guides even more so than I thought was even previously available to us. Like I've always had like a strong connection to my guide since I was a child, but it's just supported me in ways that I don't know, in so many ways. And then it's also supported me in terms of like just bringing clarity to questions I've carried since childhood. And that alone has brought in a deep sense of relief. And I also just want to say, you know, I wasn't very visible on social media much of last year after April and May because a lot of what I was doing required time, learning, embodiment, and deeper listening. And much of that work was happening behind the scenes. And now more of it is coming forward and, starting with this course. And then I do have a book coming out in April. And it's not like, and again, I had a goal like most of my life. Like I love writing, but I never knew like the wins. And then I just got the timing. Like the guides were like, okay, it's time. And yeah. And so my message is it took time, it took practice, it took going deeper than the usual explanations. It took a lot of patience. There were some tears in there. It wasn't always easy. But the thing is, though, I feel better. I feel grounded, aligned. I feel more at peace than ever. And it took allowing the work to become what it actually needed to be. So, my friends, if you've sensed that the traditional abundance teachings skim the surface, this series was written for you. It approaches abundance as embodiment, not just mindset, receiving capacity, not just desire, energetic architecture, and the transformation can really land in real life, not just in theory. And I'm also not going to say like, "Oh my god, this is going to be like the one thing." You know what? There's a lot of elements that you can look at that can support you. And if you really show up to this, it can really support you in ways that maybe you've only dreamed about and that you've really been setting intentions for. But more you're open to it, the more that it can happen for you. And so with it, if you're interested, I will put the link for it's right now, it's only in the Inspiring You All Access. It's a 3-part harmonic abundance crystalline dowsing course. So I'll put the link in the show notes. With that, my friends, much, much love. Until soon, and stay inspired.